At this point, we're onto the back, and I lifted it from the center of the differential. You can see the jack is still there. I put jack stands right where the frame starts to flatten back out there. So it's like under the cab, and this truck's pretty light because of this bed in the back, so you shouldn't have any issue. And then I let the jack down. And the reason I did that, guys, is I'm gonna start, I got the wheels off, but I'm gonna actually start back here on the shackle. Now, I'm kind of cheating because normally you would see an inner fender liner here and you wouldn't have this great of access, which honestly, you know, because it's been painted, it's out. And the other thing is you have really good access back here in the back since the bumper's not on. So you can do it with both those things in place. Holy cow, this paint. I don't want to get back on that. Anyway, these are 21 millimeter. And so if you have a factory hitch, you're gonna have to take that off. There's just no way around it. But the reason I let the pressure off the jack is once I loosen these guys, I'm gonna have to lift the rear end a little bit to get that bolt, this top bolt up here clear in order to get it out of place. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a 21, should be 21 millimeter. I'm gonna zip these out real quick, and I should be able to get my impact in here. So I should be able to do it relatively quickly. And we'll get both sides out. So I'm gonna get the bottom out on both sides, and I'm gonna loosen the top as far as I can on both sides. And then I'll show you what I'm talking about as far as lifting it up to get the bolt out of place. Once we get the bottom bolt loose, we can go ahead and drag it out, but the top one, you can see it's gonna hit the frame. So I'll show you in just 1 second when I get them loose. Well, I didn't show you guys, but that was a fight. Holy cow, was it a fight? Pretty sure I'm gonna have to lift the bed up on this thing. You know, on a regular bed or a fleet side bed, you should be able to get it up far enough to pull that bolt out, but I don't know if you guys notice, it's all the way up and I do not have enough room. So here's my plan. There's only 2 bolts in this bed right now anyway, per side. I guess 4 bolts total. But I'm gonna lift the bed up just a little bit, and to be honest with you, the leaf springs will probably lift it up, but we need to get enough clearance to get that bolt out of the top. So a step side is a little more cumbersome to put this in than a regular cab or fleet side bed. But guys, I had issues with that being on here so long that the bottom bolt wouldn't come out. So literally what I did, sprayed it with WD-40, hit it with a hammer. Like in here, I can't get a big throw on it. So I just kept tapping it, kept spinning it, tapping it, spinning it, tapping it. And after about 20 minutes of fighting, I got it out. Now the one on the other side's not so bad, but yeah, this one, it wanted to give me some fits. So there should be, like I said, 8 bed bolts total if you guys don't have your bed bolts out, but you are going to have to lift this bed. This little ridge right here keeps you from being able to get that out without doing so. At this point, hopefully you guys can see now we have enough room to get this out. And I'd really like to have 2 hands back here. Maybe I'll go around to the other side real quick. May not have as much light here. We'll take that one out. There you go, it's pretty decent light. Anyway, I want to hold this while I'm taking it out. Get this old one off. So, look at this thing, guys. Look how bad this is. Golly, that's rough. You know, that's 300,000 miles though. So either way, we got it off there. And what we need to do is we need to take our new ones, which I'll list in the description, Beltex. And the reason I go with Beltex, guys, is they have a rubber bushing in the bottom, just like the factory. So they're not gonna be noisy. They're not gonna squeak around, make any crazy stuff like that. So all we have to do, if you want a 2-inch drop, you're gonna put it in the top hole. If you want a 1-inch drop, you're gonna put it in this next hole down. And then honestly, guys, I would not use this hole. That would be really close to the factory drop. So basically, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna set it in just like your old one came out. And it really, guys, I think technically they're supposed to go in with this facing back. I don't remember on the instructions. Let me take a peek real quick. It really shouldn't matter because they don't swing all that much. But let's take a look just to make sure I'm telling you guys right. I don't want to tell you wrong. And then if you have something that has a block under the leaf springs, you can take it out. But So it's saying the open end facing forward, which is generally what I do anyway. That means this opening would face forward. Let's put it in there. Let's see what we got. That looks good. So now let's find our nut that goes on the end of this, if I can find it somewhere, and we'll thread it on the end here. But basically, guys, that's what you do. Here's what I think I'm going to do off camera, though. I'm going to clean these bolts up on my bench grinder. So they're just, actually, I'm going to take that one back out. I'm just afraid if I don't, we're going to have some issues with them seizing up down the road. So it's good measure to do that. I'm going to clean all 4 of them up, and then we'll put them back in place with a nut on the end. Well, guys, what I did was I cleaned up the bolts for that in the back for those hangers or shackles, whatever I guess shackles technically is the technical term. But anyway, I cleaned them off with my wire brush, and I'll show them to you here in a little bit what they look like. I sprayed a little bit of paint on the areas where they're not threaded to try to keep the corrosion down. It's just always a good idea, and they were really in there. So at this point, while that stuff's drying, I'm going to go ahead and take this rear caliper off, and I've got an 12 millimeter. Take that back. And sometimes this inner wants to spin. Sometimes you can hold it with your hand. But once we get this off, like I said, my dad's going to paint the brackets and the calipers themselves. And I think that'll look nice, especially with the wheel he's chosen, because it kind of stands out. You're going to be able to see a lot more of the caliper than you normally would have. So we'll set the bolts for this up here. I need to go get my pry bar. Actually, it's back here from prying on this other stuff. We'll pry this out, and I'm just going to set it up here for now. I probably will go ahead like I did in the front and compress that, and then we'll get the bracket off next. Now that we've got that off and compressed, I'm going to go ahead and take the bracket off, guys. It should be an 18 millimeter if you guys have the factory brakes back here in the back. Now remember, I went to a dual piston caliper on mine, and so my dad is going to upgrade. He's not going to upgrade to a dual piston, but he's definitely going to be upgrading with the brakes that we're putting on it. But I want to get these off so he can get them painted, like I said. We'll get both these 18s out, get this out of the way. We can go ahead and pull the rotor off, get it out of the way, and really that's it. We'll go right back to the hanger, or sorry, the shackle, get it in place, and then hopefully in the meantime he can get this stuff painted, and maybe we can go back together. I still am waiting on him to get the steering rack, which will take a couple days. Now you can see I've just kind of got that hanger up in there. I am going to put a little bit of grease on that bottom piece and a little on the top as well. You don't have to, guys. It's just good measure in my opinion. But I did tell you that I was going to show you. Let's put this down or see if I can get at the hook somewhere. I want to show you guys the bolts after I cleaned them up. So you can see I sprayed a little bit of paint on them, and then I cleaned all the threads out. Like I said, just to keep it from getting all rusty down the road. So we're going to go ahead, put these back in. Like I said, we're using the top hole, and I'll show you guys once it's all assembled. Now you can see we've got them in place. Got the bolts on there. Like I said, I put a little grease on both the leaf spring and the bottom there. And guys, what we need to do now, and I've already done it, but we lifted the rear end up. So you can see I've got the jack here in the center. Normally I would put something under the tires, but because we're waiting on him to come through with the brakes, we don't have that option. So I'm going to put some pressure on that, and we're going to go ahead and torque these things down to 70 foot-pounds. So both the top and the bottom. Now, a lot of guys hammer these down with an impact. That is not the correct way to do it. It's going to cause some binding, squeaking, premature wear out of those bushings. And so, like I said, I really like the Beltec because they come with that rubber bushing. They're nice and quiet. None of that polyurethane, which, like I said, guys, I'll list all this stuff in the description. But either way, let's get those torqued down to 70. Generally, I kind of lay on the ground underneath it and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I won't show you guys me actually torquing them. But at this point, I think we're gonna move back to the front, and I may go ahead and start reassembling some of the other stuff. I know we're still waiting on a rack, but I can go ahead and probably put the A-arms together and the spindles back on, I think. And then I can thread the rack out afterwards. But yeah, let's torque this and then go back to the front. Now here we are reassembling the front, like I said. So guys, here's the spring. I did shoot it with some paint. So this, remember I said I was gonna cut a half a hoop off. This is the half hoop that I cut off. I cut it off from the top. We are still going to be using our upper mounting piece of rubber. Like I said, it's always a good idea to keep these because they really cut down on the noise that these things make. So you wanna make sure you get it lined up the same way it was before. You can see the indentation where it's almost rubbed through. And other than that, we need to set this guy right here in that pocket on the bottom of this arm. So you can see it right here. And this is the hardest part, guys, honestly, is getting this thing started. And it's kind of dangerous in a way. It probably wouldn't hurt to have a couple jacks handy to get the pressure on this. But what I do is I'm going to use this jack and I'm going to get under this arm right here on the ledge, and I kind of face it to where I can still get, I still need to be able to get, see how it slid off? That's not good. But what we need to do is under these little lips right here, I may move you guys to the other side because this one's a little bit better as far as me getting underneath it. So I'm gonna move the jack over to that side. Maybe I can get it under this one, I don't know. I just need the angle right to get it started. Yeah, it's sliding off, which makes me nervous. It's probably not a bad idea to get some sort of strap and put here in case that shoots off, that spring doesn't pop out under all the pressure that it's got and hit you in the face. The other thing like you can do is you can put another jack on this side and lift from it. So I may grab a second jack and put over there and then just kind of go back and forth until I get it up there. So before I get it up there, I'll pull back and show you guys what it looks like. We're about to slide off here. It's actually sliding as we talk, but I'll kind of show you what it looks like once it's compressed. It's just trying to find that area where you can lift it and feel comfortable about going ahead, taking these plastic caps off and getting your spindle in place. Now, once your spindle's in place and you get it threaded down, you shouldn't have any issues as far as like it popping back off, and then you can move your jack out and go ahead and start reassembly. But like I said, I'll show you guys once I get this lifted up before I put the spindle on, and then I'll show you what we do next. So you can see I switched sides with the jack, and here's what I'm hoping, guys. I'm hoping we stay in place, but we should be able to sneak the spindle on at this point. Just getting all these lined up. At least we're hoping we can sneak the spindle on. Got it on the bottom. Get the nut started here. Making sure it goes on the right way. Once I get a couple spots on that, then we'll put the top in. And the cool thing is the top, you know, since we didn't tighten anything up, we have quite a bit of play here. So we can lift that up and get this top one started. Then you can relax a little bit. Now, for some reason, I noticed that this is a 19, and generally they're 18s on the top, but for some reason this replacement one I'm gonna list down there is a 19. So we're gonna snug it up a little bit more before I move the jacks out. Same way with the bottom. It's still the 24, like the original one. So go ahead and get those snug before you pull your jack out of place. Now that that's all assembled, I'm gonna go ahead and put the shock back in. And so remember, we need the bushing here on the top to go up through the middle. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just lightly thread those 13s in the bottom. But we're gonna push it up through the top here, and then we'll get this top bushing in place here that you see. I have to move my brake over a little. And we'll put the nut on top. And then, like I said, I'm gonna lightly thread these 13s in the bottom. And so that'll give us the ability to snug them down. I'm not gonna get them tight right now, guys. Like I said, I like to torque everything once the suspension's loaded, but we'll get these two 13s back in the bottom of the strut, or the shock, I mean, and then we can pull back and see what's next. Now that we have the front suspension all bolted together on both sides, my dad just dropped off the new steering rack, which I'm excited for, guys, because it actually looks like a pretty nice piece. I was kind of worried because you can't buy a new one anymore, like from GM. They're all reman, and they're honestly overpriced. So this is a different version, which I'll list down in the description, but it is made in the US, which, you know, used to mean something. I'm hoping that it still does, but it looks really good. I ordered one of these for my Trans Am quite a while back, and it just didn't look that great. But this one here, I ended up replacing it with another one, but this one here looks really, really well made. And so either way, we need to get it in this truck. And guys, look, a good idea, and what I generally do is use the seat belt to hold the steering wheel in place. And now that we have it in place, I'm gonna try to do all this from underneath the truck because it's quite a ways down there. At least I'm hoping I have access. The fact that it's a 6-cylinder truck gives you a little more room. You know, the engine's a little further back, but either way, I'll get my light. We'll show you what we need to unhook. We obviously need to unhook the steering shaft, push it off. And then the least favorite part of mine is getting the lines loose, because you know we're gonna leak fluid everywhere. So I'll probably put my drain pan down there as well. Let's take a look at what we need to address here. You can see the lines that we need to take loose. Hopefully you guys can see that on the front here. This thing does have a power steering cooler, so the two thicker lines are the ones that we're going to be disconnecting, and they should be an 18. I've got an 18 here handy. I'll let you guys know in a minute. And then the drive, or the actual steering shaft that goes into it, you guys can't see that bolt, and you can see it's got a massive oil leak, guys, but there's a bolt up here on this guy. I'll try to show that to you once I get it disconnected, but it should be a 13 for right above this little collar right here that you see, and that attaches the actual steering linkage to the top of this. So we need to get that loose, and then we'll worry about getting the rack out once we get the lines loose. But I'm more concerned about, you can see it's already leaked just in the short time it's been here, but he definitely has, almost looks like the water pump's leaking as well, but we're not working on that right now. We're just going to concern ourselves with the leak in the power steering pump and getting the new one in. So let's get those lines disconnected. I'll try to show you guys once I get it disconnected what we're looking at. Well, guys, it was actually an 11 millimeter, and you can see that not only did I get it loose, but I pushed the, well, I guess you can see if I move the light, but the steering shaft I pushed up. That's it right there. And I'm hitting with the end. You can see the opening on it. So at this point, there's no way we're not going to make a mess here. We're going to take the two 18-inch lines off, and if you guys are wondering which lines you're taking off, on this one you can see the ones that are plugged. So this is the new steering rack, and so we need to take those lines off. And obviously I've got my drip pan here. We're going to go ahead and let it drip in there. There's just, like I said, there's just no way to not make a mess here, but they should be 18s. I don't know why I was thinking that other was a 13. It's always been an 11 on GM products, but these are for sure 18s. Got the lines loose now. You can see them both dangling right here. Hopefully you guys can see that. And I've got my drip pan just completely filling up, getting oil all over my microphone, but either way, we got it loose. So now we need to worry about getting these loose, and I believe they're 24 millimeter. This is what holds the rack on. They're pretty long, so you'll have a bolt on this side and then obviously a nut on the other side. And what I'm planning on doing, guys, is I'm planning on getting it loose and then pulling it down a little and maybe flipping it over, try to drain some of the stuff out of the actual rack itself. The hard part's finished, and you can see that I've got it hanging here. I was going to flip it around, but it has a ground on it. Look at see the wire running in the center there? It's got a 10 millimeter, and it actually has a ground right there. I don't know. I guess that's maybe stock. I've never replaced a rack on one of these trucks, so let me know in the comments if you guys know if that's a stock ground. I assume it is. This thing's never been apart, but let's grab a 10 millimeter, take that ground off, and then we can go ahead and roll it over, let it drain a little bit, and then thread it out one side or the other. We got them side by side here now that we threaded this thing out, and guys, it literally will just thread out one side or the other, whichever side you choose to get it out of. I'm gonna measure. So it looks as though I want to line these holes up, right, the mounting holes, and then I want to measure our tie rod end to make sure that we're close. I mean, look, like I said, we're gonna have to get this thing aligned anyway, but the closer we get it, the less it's gonna, you know, scrub the tires, like I said, for the drive that he's got to make to get it aligned. So we're just gonna measure, making sure that these jam nuts are as close to the same as possible, and then I'm just gonna thread this guy back in there, and I'm gonna loosely get it in place. I don't see that this thing came, unless he just didn't bring them to me, with 2 new seals that go on the lines that actually screw in for the cooler lines. There should be new plastic seals that go on the end of those lines, and if not, we're gonna have to get some. I'm not gonna put this back together with the old smash down O-rings. We need to put new ones in. So either way, let's get it back up in there, get it, like, you know, kind of loosely put into place after we move the jam nuts, and then we'll go from there. Still waiting on my dad to get me those little O-rings, but in the meantime, we can go ahead and torque the rack down. So the rack, the bolts that you see that come through the front right there, the nut on the back of those guys need to be torqued to 136 foot-pounds. And then I'm gonna go ahead and try to put the steering shaft back in, and that little 11 millimeter bolt, and that guy should bolt or torque down to 33 foot-pounds. Now, one thing I did notice on this old one, the new one didn't come with this little thing to keep debris out. So I am gonna pull that steering shaft back off and put this little cap here back in place, just to make sure it keeps debris out and maybe helps it last a little bit longer. So I'm gonna go ahead and do those 2 things, and then I may, since I'm waiting, go ahead and start torquing down some of the front suspension. It just depends on how much the truck wants to rock when I put the jack under the A-arm and start to, you know, kind of lift it. I really would rather have the wheels on the back and the back on the ground, but we'll just have to see. But let's go ahead and get the rack torqued down. Now that our rack's torqued down, we're gonna go ahead and torque the upper and lower. So the bottom goes to 92, the lower ball joint here, the 24 millimeter. And then remember, it's a 19 up top. We're gonna go ahead and torque that to 37 foot-pounds. And then I'll probably go ahead and add grease to the grease fittings as well. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. But I'd like to leave it loose for him for painting reasons, just to make it a little bit easier on him. So I may screw the tie rods on, but I'm not gonna put them in their spot and torque them down just yet. Once we have those torqued down, we're gonna go ahead and thread this guy on. At least I'm hoping. I have to move this around. There we go. And remember, I put that jam nut, you know, similar position to what it was on the other steering rack. So make sure that you do that. You know, it's gonna get you close. The only other thing we need to do is we need to screw the grease fitting in here. I don't know why they don't, maybe because they break off. They're pretty easy to break. Maybe that's why they don't put them in before they ship it. And then, like I said, I'm gonna leave this unhooked for now until he gets the brakes painted. That'll give him the ability to, you know, move it back and forth. The plan was he took the brackets home to paint, put the brackets on, we'll put the caliper on without the rotor, and then he can move it back and forth and, you know, get a good coat on it, not having to work around anything. So just giving you an update, we did do a couple things off camera here. As you can see, one of the biggest things is we put a brand new GM front bumper on, and guys, his other one, you know, was worn out. I had a couple dings in it. And so I told him, I said, man, these fit the best. And guys, it fits absolutely insane. I'll list this in the description as well. But yeah, GM bumpers just fit good. They come with all the bracketry in place. Yeah, there's just no arguing the fitment of them. Now we've only got 2 bolts in the top here, so the 15 here, the 15 here, and then there's a 15 that comes in from the back right here to that bottom bracket. He's got to rob the clips off for the bottom ones, so there's 2 more that go. You can see that hole right there. Should be 2 more there. Now we're gonna leave the cap off and the lower valance until he gets this thing buffed out, just because, like I said earlier, that compound really sticks in that plastic stuff. So, but I wanted to get this out of my floor. I didn't, you know, I have to move it a lot to move stuff around in here because we're so cramped up, and I was just afraid I was gonna bend it. I've been really careful, so I just wanted to go ahead and mount that. But he has been out here painting his brakes, and they look really good, guys. He's just using some POR 15 caliper paint. And I think it's, honestly, he bought a better brush than I used before. So I think that's why he's having better luck with this. Actually looks really good. I'm kind of impressed because I put it on something here a while back and I didn't love it. I actually liked the G2 stuff better. And the G2 stuff is more watery. And so to me, I could put more coats on quickly. You're supposed to wait 4 hours between coats. So he's got a coat on the front side. He's just kind of holding it. Now, this is a replacement for the back on the driver's side. So obviously that's the easiest one to do. But for right now, he just held it, painted the front side, got it all coated with 1 coat. He's going to come out in the morning. We're going to put a second coat on it, the front, and then tomorrow afternoon we're going to mount up these without the rotors in place so he can paint the backside. We were originally going to mount them up and paint them all like at one time. The problem, guys, is you can't get to like the front, like the lowers here or in this area. It just kind of gets blocked out, and just to get a good coat on it to make it look nice. So he's kind of picky like me. That's kind of where I get my OCD from, guys. But either way, I think that's the update that I want to give you for now. I will show you guys when we go back together with the brakes. Obviously, we have more stuff to torque down in the front. And so once we get the brakes finished, or we're going back together with the brakes for the last time, I will show you guys what we're going to be using, the pads. We'll talk about all the torque specs and whatnot, but just thought I'd give you a quick update on where we were at currently. A little bit of excitement here because we are finished painting, and you can see what I was talking about. My dad painted the fronts, put a couple coats on, then we hung them, and he painted the back. Or actually, I painted the back, but either way, we're ready to go back together now. And so, guys, what I like to do is your new caliper, your new brake pad should come with new hardware. We left all the hardware off, obviously, to paint. We're gonna use that same 12mm that we took it apart with to begin with, and take it back apart here. Now this one's loose because you can see the old caliper setting up here. It was just, I mean, you could fix it, but it was better just to buy a new one. The boot's all messed up. And so I told him, hey, let's just order another one for this. And these are prone to go bad anyway. We've already replaced one on the other side back a long time ago. But I want to put the new hardware on this guy as well as this. Now I am going to have to take them both off in order to get the rotor on. So let's do that real quick. 18mm on the mounting bolt, and then 12, like I said, on the other. So we'll get this off. We're also going to replace all the boots. Your new brake pad should come with new boots, and we're going to clean up the slide pins really well, make sure that they're got new caliper grease on it. But I'll show you that in here in a second. Let me get this off, and then we'll pull out the new hardware and the new boots. Here's what we're going to start with. We're going to yank these guys out, and they actually are in really good shape for the age of this thing. But we're going to pull this old boot off, and we're going to put our new one on in the same manner that that old one came off. So this bigger part is going to go on the bottom. And there's no way to do this without getting a little messy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab a couple towels, wipe my hands off so I'm not printing up the new caliper. And then I'm gonna put a little bit of this caliper grease, which I'll also list below, on this guy to make sure that we get, you know, you got enough in there. I'm gonna do that on both of them real quick. So this kit I'm using actually comes from powerstop. You guys know that I'm a pretty big fan of it. Always works well. It comes with 2 different caliper pieces of hardware, depending on which rear that you have. You guys, if you check back on my old videos on my green truck, I swapped to a dual piston caliper in the rear, which is what like the newer trucks have, but it would take a bigger piece of hardware, so we won't be using that. We'll be using the smaller ones, and you'll know by the fitment. But we need to press those in. Not too bad, they literally just press right in. And you may have a little bit more trouble because if you painted them, they're gonna be a little thicker. And then I also like to put a little bit of this caliper grease, even though this brush isn't great for that. I like to put a little bit where these brake pads are gonna slide. Just keeps from making noise and helps them to be nice and free moving. I am kind of impressed though, like I said, about the slide pins. They're in really good shape for the age of this thing. But now you have another bracket or piece of hardware that goes in this guy. That's gonna be this bigger one here. So we're gonna go ahead and stick it in there. And then we're gonna go ahead and put the rotor on. And they are side specific. They will come labeled driver's side rear, passenger side rear, and so on and so forth. So we're gonna put it on real quick. And if it looks used, guys, it's because I switched to a dual piston, remember? And my dad is actually using these. Since I decided not to use them, I said, well, you can use them. So I'm gonna go grab some brake clean and clean the surface off here, and then we'll get the caliper bracket in place. Now, before I put this on, I'm gonna put a little bit, the factory puts a little bit of Loctite on. I'm gonna put some blue Loctite on here, and we're gonna put these in place, and we're gonna run them down to 148 foot-pounds. And it just depends on what rear brake you have, but 148 foot-pounds is what the factory calls for, and then 31 on the guide pin bolts. So we're gonna do that real quick, and then all we have to do is hook up the brake line. Obviously we need to put the pads in too, I guess. Now as far as these go, it shouldn't really matter. They're the same, but I'll put a little on here and we'll get them put in place on both sides. And then guys, I do like to put a little on the surface where the piston's gonna hit. So like I'm gonna rub some on here and then a little bit here on the inside, just so it slides nice and easy. Now life is a little easier when you're putting it on like this, just because you don't have the line to contend with. But we're gonna put these guys in, and remember I said these guide pin bolts go to 31 foot-pounds and 12 millimeter if you're dealing with the factory brake, I guess. And then guys, I'm not gonna show you the line. We obviously need to pop the line off. That's gonna make a huge mess. And we'll get it in place, and I'll probably go ahead and just open this bleeder. So this is the only brake we've ended up replacing. So since that's the case, I'm gonna let this thing kind of gravity bleed while I go around and do the rest of the brakes. I'm gonna go to the other side and do it real quick. It's the exact same. And then we'll move to the front where I'm gonna show you, it's a little bit different up there because we did order some new guide pin bolts because the factory ones suck. And I'll show you what I used to replace them. I think it's a way better option. Now that we got both the backside finished, let's move on to the front. So the front is a little bit different because the slide pins and the bolts are all one. And if you guys remember when I originally took these off, I said we're gonna do something different here. I hate these Torx. They strip when they get some age on them, and they're just not worth it. So we're gonna take those out, and let me show you the replacements that we've got. they actually have a hex head on them, which is what they should have came with to begin with. And I'll list these in the description down below as well. But we need to get this guy off and essentially do all the same stuff that we did to the back brake. You can see though our slide pins, this is where you have grease, unlike the back where the slide pin actually has a separate piece. You have a guide bolt that goes into that slide pin. This, I think I'm gonna have to go get my Torx to get it out of there. I just screwed it in a little tight when we were putting it together to paint. But we're also gonna replace these boots, which are a little bit different than the ones in the back as well. So let me go get that to get this out of the way, and then we'll move on. We're gonna attempt, now that we got the caliper out of the way, we're gonna attempt to use these, the new ones that come with the kit. So how this works, guys, is they actually press in. So I'm gonna go get a tap or a flat blade screwdriver or something to pry this out of here, because you can see they kind of press fit in, and hopefully we can do that. I mean, these are in good shape. We could probably reuse them, but since we've got new ones, we might as well try. I was actually able to just use a chisel here is what I'm using, just something that I could get a flat hit on. So we're gonna put these back in. We'll just tap those back in with the hammer. But yeah, these drove out pretty easy. So I actually think it'll be a little easier. I was thinking maybe getting them out would be easier with it hooked to the truck, but that's not the case. So let's get this out of the way, and we'll go ahead and load it up with our new hardware. Just like we did in the back, we'll put grease in the little slide areas. And I don't know why I'm working with it like this when I can move it. That may make things a little easier. That's why I didn't hook up the tie rod ends yet. But let's get this out of place and do all the same stuff we did to the back. Similar situation to what we had in the back. Get our new rotor in place. And it does say front driver's side. Just make sure you're putting the right one in the right spot. And we're ready to put our caliper back on and start to snug that up. Now, like we did in the back, got a little bit of Loctite here. And I don't put a lot on, guys, because inevitably I'm the one who'll have to take it apart. The torque settings on this one are a little bit different than the back. Obviously we got the same size head on the bolt. Actually, I think the same size bolt even, but these get considerable amount more torque, I believe. I'm gonna look it up here in just a second. The front may be a little easier because I can swing it around with the, especially really easy with the tie rod unhooked. Let me go grab the torque specs for this thing. And then we'll slide the pads in after we get this torqued. Actually a little less than the front, sorry. It's 129 on the bolts and 80 on the guide pins. So we'll go ahead, torque it down to 129 and move on to the pads. Unlike the back on these pads, they are a little bit different. I'm gonna put a little grease where they slide here, but see they have the wear indicators. There's two on one side and one on the other, and I don't remember. Generally, I would say that the two would go in the back, but that's what we're gonna go with. And this thing is where they're gonna slide here. We'll give it a shot. So a lot of times, guys, if you get it wrong, the caliper won't go into place once you have the pads on. So that's how we'll know whether we've got it in the right spot or not. it won't for some reason slide over these if you get it wrong. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and put caliper grease on these guys. I'm really gonna glob it on here because this has none. You wanna make sure that, you know, the ones that you pulled out, which actually looked really good and none of our boots were broken, but if you've got a ton of corrosion inside this cavity, you're gonna wanna clean that up. Just a good idea. I'm not getting it on, I'm trying not to get it on the threads anyway. Don't set it in the dirt. I've got it sitting on a piece of plastic on top of a towel. You don't want a bunch of debris in here that'll chew it up. By the way, I did run over this rotor with some brake clean to get all the, I mean, generally these don't have much on them, but just want to make sure you got a clean surface. Let's see if we can swing this thing down in place. I'm trying to keep my hands clean, guys, like I said, so I'm not printing up these freshly painted calipers. I know, I'm particular. We're gonna put some caliper grease here on the inside, just like we did in the back. Used to, I put this on the pads and somebody reached out in a video and said, why don't you put it on the actual pistons? Yeah, that makes way more sense. So then you know where it's going. This just keeps it from rattling. Now make sure, if you left your brake lines hooked up like I did, make sure that they're not kinked when you're going back in place here. And then you can slide this guy in. You'll have to move your little pieces around so they don't get all squished. Let's grab our new bolts. Get them started. And then, like I said, guys, these get 80 foot-pounds of torque. And obviously, we've got our bracket in the right spot because this slid in. Remember I said if you're not in the correct spot, it's not gonna want to slide together like it's supposed to. Got my fingerprints on this. All right, let's torque those down to 80 and we'll be complete with that part. Then we can go ahead and put our 10 millimeter here and our 10 millimeter on our A-arm to get the brake line in place. Okay, I'm a little excited. I just wanted to share this with you guys. These are 18s. Why is that so exciting? Well, the bracket's 18. Why couldn't this come like this from the factory, you know? Like, this should be 18. Anyway, I just want to share that with you guys, that the replacement, not only will it not strip out, or at least hopefully it won't strip out on you in the future, it's the same size as the bracket. I've always wondered why GM, like, your bleeder's a 10, your banjo bolt's an 11, this is an 18, these are a Torx, like, must have been a bunch of bends available at the GM factory when they built these. Got all the brake line back in place, guys. We've got everything tightened up, torqued down. Just gonna kind of wipe my mess up here, make it look nice. Looks good. We need to go ahead, I'm gonna go ahead, I don't have to do this right now, but I'm going to. We're gonna put this guy back in place. Just snaps in this little clip, and then I gotta grab this guy, our old holder that goes in here, and then we can go ahead and route this thing kind of up where it was plugged in before. Don't forget to plug this in or you're gonna get an ABS error. Oh, but it plugs in up top. If I can keep the light from falling on me. Go ahead and get it plugged in and set in its spot. Definitely looking good. So now all we have left to do, guys, is I need to bleed the brakes. I'll do that off camera. And then we'll come back, we'll hook up our tie rod ends, lift the front suspension. I really want to bleed the brakes first because I have all the wheels off, and remember we replaced that back one. But I want to do that before I put the wheels on, obviously, so I have access. But then I need to lift the front suspension, and I don't feel comfortable doing it with it on jack stands because the rear's wanting to fall. So we'll get the brakes bled, and then we'll come back and talk about the torque specs for the A-arms. We already torqued the spindle, but we need to do the A-arms upper and lower. We need to try to get it back close to the alignment. We need to torque the shock, and I think the tie rod end, and that should be it. Now that the brakes are on, the brakes are bled, I've done a couple things, guys. I obviously moved a bunch of stuff around, hooked up all our wires like we had talked about. I went ahead and dropped our tie rod, our outer tie rod in, and that is an 18 millimeter. That guy is going to get torqued to 44 foot-pounds, and then you need to make sure you put your cotter pin in, bend it over, cut it off. So other than that, I also have a new sway bar bushing, or end link as they would call it. And so this kind of goes together like a sandwich. So that piece there, and I'm gonna do this at the same time on both sides. It just makes your life a lot easier. Then we go together down with that one. There is a center piece. Get it all out of the bag here. I'll list this below as well, guys. Put that on. You kind of got to hold it from the bottom as you're doing all this. Oh, actually we need to put a washer on first. Otherwise it'll just smash that. So a washer, then this, then another washer. And you'll see here in a second why I want to do it both sides at one time, because we're going to run out of room. I'm going to have to lift, as you can see now, I'm too far. I'm going to have to lift this thing up to get it underneath there for it to even fit. So that's why I want to do both sides at the same time. And the OCD in me makes me crazy that those are white. So you should have 3 washers, and then your top one has the washer built in the nut. Now we're gonna come back and torque this down later, but I wanted to show you guys it going together now. Because in my opinion, it's a good time to put it on. There we go. So we'll get it started. I'm gonna just loosely thread it on like that because I am still gonna have to lift the other side. I'm gonna go ahead and get this torqued, and then we'll move on to compressing the suspension and tightening some other stuff. Once we got that done on both sides, we're gonna grab our jack. And we're gonna put it underneath here, but we need to have access to the bolts for the shocks. So what I'm planning on doing is I'm gonna lift it on the bottom ball joint. Not my preferred method, but just in the meantime while we get these shocks torqued, I'm gonna relieve some of the pressure off this. We're gonna move it again here in a minute, so this is just temporary, but now we've got all the pressure off this, and we're gonna go ahead and torque the bottom shock bolts to 18 foot-pounds and the top to 15. Now what we've got here, after we got that torqued down, we're gonna move on to the A-arms. And so you guys remember, those things get pretty snug if you've watched some of the past videos, but the bottom, so the bottom, remember they're like 18 on one side, and then the nut, I believe it's a 23 or a 24. Those need to get torqued to 129. So the bottom 2 A-arm bolts, this guy here and the one on the other side. And then the top, we're gonna line up our original marks. Remember, we marked the top, and I'll show you guys once we're all torqued down. The top goes to 140, so it's even tighter. Generally, guys, that's what I torque it down to. I know it seems like a lot, but you need to make sure your suspension is compressed. You don't want to tighten it up with the bushings at full droop, otherwise you'll wear them out. And that's pretty much it, other than we need to tighten up that sway bar end link. But to be honest with you guys, as far as that goes, I just tighten it down until the center stops spinning. So there's no real torque spec on that because you're smashing down that rubber or polyurethane bushing. So that's just how I've always tightened them. So after that, guys, we're gonna set the wheels on this thing and hopefully get it on the ground. And actually, before I get it on the ground, I'm gonna put a little bit of, since we changed the rack out, you need to make sure that you fill up your power steering reservoir and go back and forth trying to get as many bubbles out. And you need to do that a couple times, keep refilling it. And the reason why is if you just start it, that's gonna make a huge milkshake and a bunch of bubbles in that reservoir. So try to go, I go back and forth like lock to lock, probably 10 times. So 1, 2, similar to that. Do that 10 times, and I do that at least 3 different sequences, and then we can start it. So I guess I won't show you guys any more of that. The next thing you guys are gonna see will be us getting this thing on the ground. Make sure that you go through, check everything, make sure everything's snug, tight. Make sure you put grease in all your fittings, which you've already done. And yeah, getting the wheels on. One other thing I wanna tell you guys about, when you get everything like settled, right? You get the wheels on, and everything's torqued, we still need to adjust the tie rod ends. So, you know, I went back to close to measurement from what the original rack was, but you can see with the steering wheel centered, we've got a little bit of toe out. So what we're going to do, I've adjusted this one a little bit, still got quite a ways to go, but we are going to spin this inner tie rod right there into place. I'm using a couple adjustable end wrenches just because I didn't want to get up and try to find the exact size. But then once we get these leveled out, and guys, you're really going to do it by eye. You're going to look and see if the tire's poking out, we need to bring it back in. And so you can spin one direction or the other, the inner tie rod, and that'll thread that outer tie rod in or out. And so once we get that adjusted where we want it, then we should be able to go ahead and cinch that lock nut down and get this thing set down on the ground. On the ground, that's a little bit exciting, to be honest with you. You know, we've done a ton of stuff here, but here's what I think I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go do the break in, which is the 5 stops back to back of 40 to 10, 5 stops back to back right after that of 35 to 5, and then a 5-minute cooling period where you don't hit the brakes. So that's kind of tough to do. Just make sure you got, you know, ample room to do that. But I'm gonna drive this thing, and then we'll come out and look at it, or I'll bring it back in here. It's pretty windy today. And kind of look at once the suspension has settled back up and see what it looks like. I know I told you guys we were gonna do a lot more stuff in this video at the beginning because we have all these new parts, but he'd rather, and I agree, we're gonna let the guy, my painter that did this truck is actually gonna buff this truck out, fix the issues that unfortunately the other painter had, you know, did. And so we're gonna wait to put the other parts on. But either way, let's go get this thing down the road. I'm not gonna show you guys that process. I'll just come back here in the garage and we'll look at it once the suspension is settled. We are back from a drive, guys, and I have to say, everything is working like it should. No awkward squeaks, noises, brakes dragging. Yeah, I mean, that braking period, man, it really gets them hot to bed those pads in. But it's really necessary, guys, in order to get the bite that you want. So like I said, read the instructions on the power stop. It says it on the box, on the brake pad box. Follow those instructions. You're gonna do 10 stops back to back to back. It really kind of makes my neighbors mad. I think I had 2 of them behind me that had to pass me. And then I just drive at like 2 miles an hour with the hazards on, letting it cool down for 5 minutes. But either way, we are back. This thing is on the ground. It is a little lower. Is it the low that I would want, like here? No. But he daily drives this thing, and so I get it. He hauls a lawnmower trailer with it. You know, he uses it for a truck, and so, you know, he doesn't want to deal with a slammed pickup. And I think I probably could have talked him into a 2.4, but then we would have had to, honestly, guys, even a 2.4 needs a notch. It really does. And and maybe we'll do that down the road, but I really want to see it with the other wheels on it. I told you guys at the beginning of this video we have other wheels, but I'm just going to have to let you guys wait. I don't know how long it's gonna be before my painter can get it in, and we are literally not gonna do another thing to it until he gets it in, because like I said, we don't wanna throw compound all over the mirrors, the top cap for the bumper, the new bed rails, the new steps, but I think I have a lot of faith in my painter. So like I said at the beginning of the video, guys, I feel like he kind of got hosed by this guy, but I have a lot of faith in my painter, and he'll do a good job. So if it can look any better than it's going to look, which I think he will be able to do that, that will be awesome. So stay tuned, guys, because we will have more on this truck. I just don't know how soon it'll be. I know that you know, my painter is got a ton going on, so I don't know if it'll be a month before he gets this in. It may be a week, it may be 2 months, but I will let you guys know. Let me know though in the comments, guys, if you like this video. I know the truck guys out there, you can't not like an NBS GMC truck. It's the reason I bought mine. It's the reason a lot of you guys are watching this channel. But if you did enjoy this video, guys, like always, please go down there and smash that thumbs up button. If you are not subscribed, you got to get subscribed. Go down there, hit that subscribe button. Of course, while you're doing all that, ring that bell icon that notifies you every time we drop a new video. And stay tuned to see what we work on next.